more than just a report back, but also a testament of government's resolve to respond appropriately to the plight of those who are vulnerable in our society. Without a doubt, farm workers and domestic workers fall within this group, and this department will do its utmost best to ensure that we make not only their lives better, but design a better deal for labor in general. But first, let us recap how we got here. In November 2012, farm workers in the Western Cape went on strike, demanding 150 rands per day as the minimum wage. Government responded by sending senior representatives, including ministers, that was the Minister for Agriculture and the acting minister by then of Minister Angie Motshekga, who was acting on behalf of the Minister of Labour, to intervene and resolve the strike. We did this by bringing parties together to negotiate a settlement. This included meetings convened by the ministers, by the Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, which collapsed as employers indicated that they did not have a mandate to enter into discussions regarding wage increases, and instead they proposed that negotiations should be held at the farm level. At the same time, Department of Labour published 2 notices in the Government Gazette announcing the intention to cancel the sectoral determination and starting a process to review the minimum wages. Department of Labour also convened a meeting with Agri-SA and other employer organizations to initiate a process of negotiations. During the negotiations, the following parties participated. That was Agri-SA, Agri-Sector Union Forum, AFASA, LWO Employers Organization, AWETUK, Farm Workers Dwellers Forum, Food Sovereignty Campaign, Women on Farms Project, Maubuye Land Rights, United Democratic Front, Food and Allied Workers Union, COSATU, Cape Agriculture Employers Organization, and DAO SA. The first negotiation meeting between the parties was held on the 22nd of November 2012 under the auspices of the CCMA. During the negotiations, the parties agreed on an overarching framework for conducting negotiations. That negotiations will be conducted within the ambit of the Labour Relations Act and the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, and that a sense of agency was needed, which could also mean exploring options outside of the legislative framework. After a list of demands by Labour was tabled, parties agreed to a number of things, including setting a 2-a-side task team, establishing a mediation task team, which would evaluate and assess all complaints brought by workers and farmers, and the Bureau for Food and Agricultural Policy will provide an agricultural economic analysis. Alongside the negotiations process, Department of Labour commenced a series of public hearings throughout the country to obtain inputs from the entire sector. A process concluded in the middle of December 2012. We further extended this process in the Western Cape by another week, ending on 20 January 2013. During the public hearings, 483 employer organizations attended, whilst 1,145 employee organizations attended and made meaningful inputs. Workers and their representatives continued to demand 150 rands per day, whilst employer wanted to wait for the results of the BFAP, which they wanted to be factored in the review. Early this year, the Minister sent the Director General of the Department of Labour to meet the parties again to try and persuade them to resume negotiations under CCMA auspices. Employer parties still maintain that they did not have a mandate to discuss minimum wage increases, and thus no negotiations took place. As indicated, Department of Labour had already commenced with the review. The investigation by the department and the Employment Conditions Commission has been duly completed, and the report with recommendations was forwarded to the Minister. When considering the report by the Employment Conditions Commission, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act requires that, amongst other issues, the ability of the employer to conduct business successfully, the impact that proposed wage will have on job creation and job retention, the impact of the minimum wage on poverty alleviation, and the impact that it would have on the cost of living should be considered. In addition, the Employment Conditions Commission in its report indicated that when making its recommendations to me, they were also guided by the BFAP report. The BFAP report, which I'm sure you are privy to, made a number of conclusions. There is no need for me to go through all those aspects to these highlights. That the average wage based on farm workers is 84 rand 90 rands per day. That if the average wage increases to more than 104 rand 98 rands per day, many farms will be unable to cover their operating expenses and hence not to be able to pay back borrowings or to afford entrepreneurs' remuneration. The study also indicated that the real problem is that even at what seems to be an unaffordable minimum wage on 150 rands per day, most households cannot provide the nutrition that is needed to make them food secure. Consequently, the Employment Conditions Commission had to take into consideration a balance a number of factors. Having duly studied and considered the recommendations by the majority members of the ECC, I would like to announce the following in relation to the new minimum wage level and minimum wage increases during the subsequent years. That the new level of the minimum wage for 1 March 2013 to 28 February 2014 be pegged at 105 rand per day for employees who works 9 hours a day, or 11 rand 66 per hour, 525 per week, or 2,274 rand 82 cents per month. That the new sectoral determination be promulgated for a 3-year period, and that during year 2 and 3, wages be increased by CPI, which is quintile 1 plus 1.5%. In line with the new minimum wage, Department of Labour will, towards the end of the term of the new wage dispensation, undertake a similar study to assess the impact of the new wage in the sector. In addition, the Department of Labour will also forward the BFAP report to NEDLAC for consideration in dealing with the long-term issues relating to the transformation of the agricultural sector in South Africa. I would urge organized business and labor in the agricultural sector to use this opportunity to come together to find ways of improving labor relations in their sector. As the National Development Plan 2030 states, and I quote, "The relationship between farmers and farm workers is difficult and needs to be far better to achieve agricultural expansion, higher employment, and better living conditions." That is in page 233 of the NDP. It is time to begin working together towards a vision for the farming sector, one in which the sector expands and creates jobs, and where there are better relations between farmers and farm workers and their organizations. Government would like to thank those farmers who have come to the party and have negotiated in good faith with their employees or their representatives. Agriculture is an important sector of our country, and it is imperative to ensure that it is stable at all material times. We would like to urge those who still have not engaged in meaningful negotiations to do so. After all, a healthy working relationship between the employer and the employee makes good business sense. I also want to indicate that the Employment Conditions Commission is constituted by business, labor, 2 experts, and 1 who is the independent chairperson.